Welcome to the next episode of Next Creators. Today we have William Robinson, who is working in DeFi Alliance on their accelerator. Nice to see you.
Hi, nice to be here.
Maybe we can start with your background. Where did you grow up?
Sure. So, born and raised in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Um, I am a little bit of an odd sheep here because I'm an Anglophone in a Francophone province. And I basically went through high school, college, graduate school, all in the same place with a few stints in Amsterdam and California and Copenhagen.
That's cool. What was your passions growing up? What did you study as well?
Sure. So I was a big film buff and I loved video games. And I really liked school. Like, I liked doing well. It was like gamified the right way for me. And so I was trying to become a scientist or an economist or maybe both. And then at one point I was like, wait a second, why don't I study cinema and see if I like that? And it turns out I loved it. But I realized I didn't love it as much as my peers. They were watching 30 hours of cinema a week, and I was like, "There's no way I can compete with you on the job market later. It's already like a starved humanities ecosystem." And so I thought, wait a second, I can study games because I'm playing more video games than you. And I was doing feminist, Marxist, post-colonial critique, psychoanalytic critique, all kinds of humanities approaches to cinema. And I was like, why don't I just do that to games? My professors told me games were a fad, that there really wasn't going to be a future there for me, and that no one would hire someone like me if I studied games. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway because why not? And I loved games. I basically had to figure out then why. All they asked me at the end was okay, but why bother studying games? What makes them different, special? Why would any theories be challenged by games? And the answer I kept coming back to was their rules. Like, games tell stories through their rules. So sure, they tell stories through music and words and pictures. But the special part about games, made them different from movies, was that they're systems. And these systems have ideas behind them and biases and ideologies. And how could we explore those and think about stories through rules? So I did that for 8 years. I just got obsessed. And I found out later what I was doing had a thing in economics called mechanism design or reverse mechanism design. But I was coming at it from game studies. I found the other people studying games in the academy, and we called it procedural rhetoric. And at some point, my cousin Dan was like, "You got to stop studying games and jump into crypto because there's this thing called Bitcoin, and it's telling a story through its rules that's coming to life." And I was like, "Tell me more."
That's really cool. And Dan, I assume, is Dan Robinson.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. Yeah, no, Dan, we've been in touch since even before he started investing, and we were doing whiteboard series. And Niera, actually, he was doing one of the episodes together with us.
Oh, cool.
And what kinds of games you were interested in playing at that time? Was it more complex games, or was it indie?
Sure. So I started as a normal gamer blockbuster games. I played everything from Madden to StarCraft to World of Warcraft. Diablo 2 and World of Warcraft were first loves. Really got me deep into it. Game studies for a long time could have been called World of Warcraft studies because it had such a big impact on culture and a reorganization of people. My supervisor actually wrote his first game paper on dragon kill points in World of Warcraft. But as I played more and more games, as what happens with film scholars too, your taste refines, the things you look for shift, and I became more drawn towards indie games, art house games, things that were trying to push the envelope. And because it was usually one person, they looked like ass and they sounded terrible, but they were doing something really interesting. And that one interesting thing was enough for me. And so I started teaching a course actually at university on game design, and I focused on these small independent games. And I loved those, and I started to hate mainstream games and seeing the ways they were tricking me and manipulating me and getting me to spend more hours. Um, but then at one point I discovered Dota 2, rediscovered because I played a little bit in the Warcraft 3 mod, and I still play to this day. I think it's been 4,000 hours in, and now it's kind of like golf. Like my dad used to take like clients golfing on weekends to like do business development, and now I hang out with crypto people like Hasu and like others like Muni maybe soon apparently just like playing Dota, and I love that. So it seems like chess or Dota are the two crypto games now.
That's cool. It's actually like very similar to what we do in Human Guild. We actually started to hang out in virtual world on Fridays. It kind of probably similar to those golf times, but just for different audience and different, completely different setting.
Yeah, it doesn't take like 6 hours of your day to go like play some Dota. You can like just jump on and jump off.
That's right. How would you find the audience for your lecture when you started studying? You were like obviously like a lot more passionate about this versus your professor, for whom you were studying. Who are your students, and what was the kinds of things you were teaching?
Sure. So what happened was I went on a search like where was game studies being happening, like who was bothering to do this, and during my undergrad I just bought every book that had games and like was peer reviewed, and through all of those peer reviewed titles I sort of kept track of where the professors, and I applied to all the universities. NYU had a lot, University of Southern California had a lot, Copenhagen had a lot, Finland had a lot, but my own town of Montreal had a whole bunch too. And so, because I was, dating who is now my wife, it was a lot easier to stay in town. So I went to Concordia, which is like a university that's like an upstart. It's like trying to fight with the big institutions, but it's only like 50 years old and is trying to be a research institution. So it took a risk on games. It's like, why don't we study games in case it pans out and games one day become important? We'll at least be early adopters. And that was cool for me. So I went there, and my students were in English department. So they were learning how to think about novels and how to think about narratives and stories. And so what I was there to do was make them think systematically and systemically, and think about the story systems tell. And that was really my focus, though we would talk about things like transmedia storytelling. What does it mean to like tell the story across a game and a movie and a TV show and a book at the same time? Or what does it mean to tell stories architecturally? It's like the space of a game tells a story, right? What does it mean to learn a narrative by inhabiting an area? And how does an area bleed narrative? And also looking at games that were political, trying to do things like push for equal rights between men and women, what you would call a feminist game, and that was also really interesting and eye opening. Early on, there's so much pushback with like, it's a game, how could it be art? Or it's a game, how could it have a serious opinion? Like games are fun, and my sort of response was like, well, games don't have to be fun. Like just like movies don't have to be fun. You can have like a painful movie or a serious movie. So why not a game? I don't know that. So that's what I was trying to open people's eyes to.
Hmm. And since you mentioned about books, I'm kind of like a bookworm. I was wondering like which books at the time like really stood out to you.
Like books to talk about game design. There were a few. Um, so all the stuff that Ian Bogost was writing about procedural rhetoric was very powerful. I think the most accessible one is called How to Do Things with Video Games. And then I also really like Tracy Fullerton's Game Design Workshop series. It had these incredible interviews with like Richard Garfield, who made Magic Cards, on like how to make games, and really pushed people's assumptions on like best practices for game design. Like you should paper prototype everything. If you're making like Halo, doesn't matter. Like get some graph paper, draw a little man, and make that little man go shoot other little men in the head. And if you can't do that on paper and make it fun, there's no way you can do it in a video game and make it fun.
That's awesome. I see. And how did you then get into crypto? Was it like sequentially right after this, or it happened like quite a few years after?
So I was nervous that I wasn't going to get a convenient job in the academy. So I don't know if you know this, but it's hard to become a professor, especially in humanities, especially in a field like game studies, which is, although growing, you might end up in Helsinki. And that's a great place to go. I mean, don't get me wrong, but like, I don't want to live there. My family's far away from there. And so you'd have to sort of choose. You can choose like one of three things they say: your colleagues, your research topic, or your institution, like aka location. And it's really hard trade off. Like it's like a terrible trilemma. that you don't want to do. So I started looking into other job opportunities. That working in the game sector is terrible. Like everybody wants to make games, so there's too much supply side for the demand side. And so what that means is people get paid terrible to work really long hours on really boring tasks. And no one was going to let me skip the line for having a PhD in games. They're like, yeah, come do some QA. Come run into a wall for 6 hours a day. And I was like, absolutely not. I don't want to do that. So I just started like learning about crypto independently because of Dan. Dan was like, hey, go learn some crypto. And I was like, fine. I got Andreas Antonopoulos' Mastering Bitcoin, tried to read it cover to cover, but like kept hitting brick walls of like, I don't know how to program. I'm a humanist philosopher. So started going to meetups. It was starting to become the ICO like craze. I joined and Bitcoin was $1,000, but very quickly it was $2,000. I was like, it's too late. I missed the Bitcoin boat. Can't buy Bitcoin at $2,000. So what else could I do? Oh, Ethereum. That looks cool. Start learning about that. And, very slowly just building up some knowledge in the space. And at one meetup at a local event, people were saying, we're looking for someone to do marketing for a crypto company. And I was like, oh, I can do that. In fact, the university is training me to like be a public scholar and to share my knowledge through op-eds and to governments and lobby, etc. I can be the voice of some crypto company. And I pitched myself, and it was like a really, really bad salary. Like but I didn't care. Like I'm just gonna like break in, and like very quickly realized I'm terrible at like building pamphlets and marketing and like building collateral. But learn, push through, work twice as hard as I had to, and then. As I learned more about crypto, I became a consultant. I stopped doing the marketing and started talking to the clients. Because it turns out that like no one knows shit about crypto at that time, and so with only like 8 months of like intense learning, you could like just catch up. And I still kind of feel that way because your 8 months only lasts you about a year and a half before it's 80% useless. Because the crypto space moves so quickly, there's this like rubber banding effect. You can't be a runaway winner because someone can catch up if they work hard for like a year. Okay, so I'm learning how to do crypto. I'm getting these clients, and then I'm just starting to like increase my bandwidth. And we start figuring out that we're going to be auditors, and we're going to work with this auditing firm, and we're going to start like tracking where your crypto is, when it's there, building proofs, building a methodology, building architecture and software, and then automating me. Just like everything I do, try and make a product that can do that instead of me. And that was great. But I was in like a big five accounting firm, which very similar to my university was like, we're the fifth, but we want to be in the top four. Let's take on more risk. Let's do like, crazier things and hope they pan out. And crypto was that, right? They're like way ahead of the other big four accounting firms because they needed to take a risk in the same way that my university needed to take a risk on games. And my title was like blockchain risk management, right? And what that meant was like find ways for us to tolerate how risky this stupid industry is. That was fun. And then joined DeFi Alliance 6 months ago. So that's been my journey.
How did you decide on joining DeFi Alliance specifically? What was the most like appealing about this role?
I wish I could say that I applied to 10 different companies and they all wanted me. And and then I just picked my favorite. But what really happened was I applied to 100 companies and didn't get many interviews, maybe 3, 4. It wasn't really 100, maybe it was like 35. So, the reason is because when you work on the plumbing of crypto, no one knows who you are. And that's what I was doing. So, although I knew a lot about crypto, and I learned, I retrained to code. So I needed to know how the software was working at the end. So I just pushed through a Code Academy JavaScript class and then the consensus class on Solidity. And then I completed the Ethernaut gauntlet from Open Zeppelin. Those were great tools for learning. And so I knew all the back end stuff, and I knew like how companies were getting audited, and I knew like what the regulations were, and I knew what their tech stack was. But nobody cared or noticed or could guess that I could know those things. They're like, what's this philosopher of games doing in an accounting firm. Obviously, that's not the person we need or want. Um, and I was even passed up on by DeFi Alliance until like just one partner was like, oh, let's pull him out of the trash bin and see what he has to say. And it was great. Like I was a perfect fit. They realized I was a nice guy. That because I wasn't building in public, it was kind of easy to miss who I was. And so my advice to everybody, right, is like, no matter how much they pay you or how cozy your job is, if you're not building in public, if your work can't be seen on Twitter because it's secret, or because what you do is too boring, try and either ask for more money or go do something for less money for a short amount of time and then get noticed, and then do something for even more money and more interest. But when I say more money, I really mean like more responsibility and cooler shit to do. So yeah, there we it's sort of like me and my wife. We were both desperate to fall in love with the other person and had no other options, and it worked out. Uh, Same goes for me in DeFi Alliance.
And when you joined DeFi Alliance, so what was the organization like? What was DeFi Alliance focusing on? And were you kind of brought right away to help with Accelerator, or was it something that kind of gradually kind of became a thing as you joined?
Yeah, so when I joined DeFi Alliance, there were three partners: Jacob, who was COO, and Imran, who was like the CEO, and Zhao, who was CIO investments. And they were already running the accelerator, but they were getting too busy, and so they needed someone to take that role on. And the role was for a program manager, someone who would basically make sure everybody got onboarded, that teams heard about the program and they'd apply, that mentors would be like supporting it, provide a bit of direction, design some more curriculum, and also handle our ecosystem partners. So we were partnered at the time with Polkadot, Terra, and Solana, who were sort of helping us um, with some cash flow so that we could operate the accelerator, which wasn't taking equity. It still doesn't really. It's like an accelerator that just grows for the sake of it, and then like that gives us alpha and help us learn about the community. And then when there are rounds, we can like be invited to invest. It turns out the scarcest thing in crypto isn't bitcoins; it's allocation space and hot startups. And getting allocation space required this loss leader accelerator. So it worked great. The accelerator grew well. It jived with my outgoing personality and ability to host sessions and kill dead space. And also, my deep knowledge of crypto allowed me to grill our mentors publicly as they did speaking engagements for our cohorts for high entertainment value. And I grew our ecosystem partnerships. So we added Celo, we added Polkadot. I then realized that layer ones aren't the only ecosystems. Uniswap and Aave are, although smart contracts, they're also their own ecosystems with DeFi protocols building on top of them. Because I'd freed up all this space, like we could go from having 10 teams to 25 teams because it was my full-time work. So our accelerator, like, 2.5x'd in size. Our partners 2x'd. I started charging them 5 times as much because like the value we were providing was getting really high. And so like grew like a really vibrant accelerator that everybody wanted to be a part of, which was awesome. Like I've only known success at DeFi Alliance. I haven't felt a bear market yet. And so that was really spectacular, and then became head of accelerators. And when regulations came, when DeFi looked like maybe winter was coming, we were like pivoting fast. Okay, what are we going to do next? Obviously, it's games. We have Will already. Will, go stand up a DeFi Alliance game accelerator. And I was like, my dream job already? Fantastic. And so it was a crazy project. We wanted to get the best mentors in the space. And we had some network and connections, and DeFi Alliance had invested in Axie pretty early, and Immutable X, and a few other things. And so it was about trying to get a flywheel going. And so that flywheel was all about signal. How do you show that we're the place to be to do game acceleration in Web3? We talked to Ubisoft, we talked to 0x Horizon, we talked to GameStop. We talked to YGG and Axie, and all of them were like, maybe, kind of, I don't know. And then finally, I got Jiho from Axie to say yes. And that allowed Gabby to say yes, and that allowed Roham from Flow to say yes. And then once I had those, it was like, okay, everybody wants to join now. Like, great, my flywheel's rolling. We've built Signal, 25 mentors. Now we got to get the great teams. And like, how do you get the best teams when like you don't even know what you're doing? Like we're standing it up from scratch. So we decided we'd go really early. We'll find the teams at the like pre-seed stage, and see if that works. We'll put an application out. Look, here are our mentors. Who wants to work with these mentors? And we got about 60 applications, and now there's 8 teams that have been confirmed internally, and 5 that have been publicly announced so far. They'll all be announced by the end of the week, though.
That's cool. How do you think also about like creation of a curriculum? Like what are the needs that you surfaced and kind of figured out the way to educate to help with those needs in DeFi context, and how is it different from the game accelerator?
So the DNA of DeFi Alliance was in liquidity provisioning, because it was founded by people like Jump Capital and DRW and Cumberland, who are like these big prop trading firms. And they have a lot of risk tolerance. And so they could basically go after yield in DeFi protocols at scale. And so that's what helped us build the flywheel, is that we could get in DeFi protocols, help them bootstrap their liquidity, they'd take off. And you can see that like in the data. Like if you ever like look at like, I don't know, a Dune Analytics chart of like a DeFi protocol that joined our cohort, it's like flatlining and then hockey stick. So that's what we focused on. And so our curriculum focused on that, how to negotiate for that liquidity, how to give up governance for the liquidity, how to think about liquidity mining programs and tokenomics around that. So we were going to serve this very niche thing. Like you have this like Y Combinator accelerator that's like, we do biotech, we do machines, we do like AI, we do crypto. And we're like, we only do crypto, but we also only do DeFi and crypto, but we only also do DeFi and crypto for people who need liquidity at this exact moment. And so like this extremely specific curriculum was quite powerful, because when a DApp gets liquidity, its underlying layer 1 gets liquidity. So now you've got someone who needs us to succeed, because if we succeed, they succeed. And so that's what helped our community get built, is that everybody has the same stakes. And then they needed other things. They need legal help. They need marketing help. They need recruiting help. So we're tackling them one at a time. We hired Shah. Oh, in 2 days, you'll know that we hired a lawyer who is like very good at crypto legal. Used to be at the SEC. Used to be at BlackRock. Has been like doing deals since 2017 in like SAFs and safes for crypto companies, and he helps our cohorts out. We've got QuantStamp as a preferred vendor, so that if someone joins the DeFi Alliance, they get to skip the line and get their code audited faster. We're trying to figure out what the pain points are and alleviate them. Right now, I'm chasing a tokenomics guy. I can't tell you who because it's too much alpha, but I want like basically a major studio game economist to just like give up on Web 2 and come help all our DeFi and gaming teams with their tokenomics, because no one knows what they're doing when it comes to tokenomics. It's such a scarce resource, and you don't need to do it full time. You just need someone to sort of set it up over the course of like, I don't know, a week, and then like figure it out from there. So those are the pain points we're after.
Yep, that's actually super interesting. When it comes to gaming, what I'm seeing is that there are like kind of people building really complex economies, and for that you need like token economics, for like I guess help from people who built like very mature kind of economies before, and who like really good at like Excel modeling and that kind of stuff, like coming from like investment banking background. On other side of it, like maybe bottoms up things are the kinds of things where people, maybe the economies are not as mature, maybe they will become mature later on, but they are not mature in the beginning. But it's more maybe about teaching how to build together with a community, almost how to make games in very incremental fashion, but together with the community. Is what I'm seeing is kind of like what people kind of need on a like kind of bottoms up of this versus versus like more complex things. Do you see it kind of like similarly? Kind of like community needs are very important, economy needs, or
Yeah, I think that it's very dangerous to start with a tokenomic model. What you want to do is figure out what your desired behavior is and then incentivize that with tokens. And you want those tokens to come from value capture. And that's what Bitcoin does, right? Bitcoin wants people to hash. How's it going to get them to hash? It's going to pay them in Bitcoin. Why is Bitcoin valuable? Because the network has people who hash, and that allows it to transact in a decentralized and uncensorable way. Okay, cool. Uniswap, it lets people swap their tokens. That's valuable. So if it can capture value on all those swaps and then redistribute them, it can pay people to govern the protocol and make sure that that protocol can adapt with the times and grow and be valuable. These like self-perpetuating machines, you want them to have strong tokenomics, but in games it's so early, we don't know what the incentives we need to incentivize are. So I really like Dark Forest as a game. And the reason I really like it is because it does two things. It pays people programmatically for winning with these planets that have no value. Like they're not usable in the game. They don't look particularly nice. They don't have pretty cool names. Like they just have some kind of scarcity. And the team is like, they will never have value potentially. Like we don't know what they're for. But just because there's an on-chain record of who's doing well and caring, that's like enough for the community to be like, they'll figure it out. We don't need to know what the token economics are. We just want this game to succeed. And then they also get to hand out planets to builders, people who are building better front ends, marketplaces, graphics, all kinds of like usability pieces, plugins, automating scripts, whatever people build. If they do a great job, then the committee of 3 founders for Dark Forest hands out a planet to them. And that's not tokenomics, right? That's like benevolent despotism, or like an oligarchy, maybe. And I love that. And I tell people about this a lot. It's like one of my favorite things to talk about. Everybody knows that Wolverine's superpower isn't claws and metal bones, right? His superpower is super healing, which is why he can have claws and metal bones. But people forget that Captain America's superpower isn't like super strength and a powerful shield. He's super good, which is why he can get super soldier serum injected into his veins and not turn evil, because power corrupts, right? But not like when you're multiplying 0, right? He's got 0 corruption available. He's like a true north moral compass, which is why he fights Iron Man in like this democracy versus benevolent despotism war. And if your protocol is headed up by one of these Captain America figures, you have a lot of leeway. People can trust you to do the right things and build with you and figure out, or hope you'll figure it out eventually, right? And you can see that in a lot of public good protocols. Like even Bitcoin had these specialty keys that like Satoshi and a few other people had that allowed them to like send an alert message to the entire network. Or even like new DeFi protocols, you want there to be some kind of centralization early to make sure the protocol, if it fails, can be turned off. And this model of centralized governance early allows for flexibility that like a fully decentralized tokenomics based thing just can't do.
that's right? Yeah, that's super interesting because like for when we were starting Near Protocol, we also had a lot of kind of to figure out on that front, kind of like to go decentralized, kind of like Ethereum, pretty much from the very beginning, because Ethereum also had to decide from the very beginning. There was a quite contentious actually battle in terms of is it traditional model or is it the one that's brand new kind of model that goes decentralization right away? And I think it has like trade-offs in itself in terms of how quickly you can execute if you're like centralized, but also how strong or weak is your community. So there's like also that trade-off, I would say, which is like super interesting.
Yeah, MakerDAO like pioneered the like progressive decentralization model of having this like, stable coin that was really controlled by a company and then just like dissolving that company over time and firing everybody, saying like the protocol runs itself now, everybody go home.
That's right. That's right. And I think we'll see a lot more of this kind of going forward. Foundations and things like that being kind of born and grow, and then grow, like kind of decentralize themselves out of existence also.
And I'm not a lawyer, but like there's a really important legal reason for that, right? Which is that if you are centralized, you're at the mercy of the regulatory bodies. But as soon as you stop maintaining your protocol, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but like the premise is basically you're much harder to fight because you're just like code that exists now. Like you can't do anything as a developer. You built it, it's gone. You have no control over its evolution. And if you tokenize governance and spread that governance across the planet, like the way Uniswap did, it's kind of like laundering yourself. You're like, hey, I'm now untouchable. Thank you.
I was wondering, like, to when it comes to gaming, also, how do you think about the trade-off between building very strong gameplay, because in traditional gaming it's all about kind of content side of it, and the gameplay, but then you have this side of crypto gives this economy side to it, right? Which is more like has to do with incentives. And for example, like XC is example of something that's driven by incentives, and a lot of things in crypto is driven by incentive, as you mentioned. So how do you think about the role of gameplay and also kind of balance how do you balance this new primitive but also have compelling gameplay?
Games already do a lot of incentive work, and they work very hard to make sure that players play in a fun way. So, um, if, for instance, the best way to win a game and get points and grow in value is to like just lower kick with your character on loop, like against like some fighting game, um, the game will nerf that behavior, right? Because that isn't sustainable in the long term. And so the work that players do on behalf of the game designer is to pleasure themselves, right? And to incentivize players to pleasure themselves. And if the game is incentivizing players to win in a way that isn't pleasurable, well, then the player stops working, stops producing value, and the game's ability to capture that value goes away. So I think that you're going to have to figure out on a much higher and more dangerous scale how to incentivize behaviors from players that aren't just like grinding, small love potions all day long. Um, I think that's going to be an interesting problem to solve. Uh, I also think we're going to see a lot of different models. So there are going to be games that are cosmetically on chain, right? Like not relative to their gameplay. In the way, like in Team Fortress 2, I could have like Apple earbuds and they were like scarce and only for the people who like joined on the Mac release. And those became the currency. But they were kind of irrelevant to gameplay per se. And so we'll see that. And then we'll see games that are on chain where the affordances of blockchain matter. I mentioned Dark Forest before because I think it's a good one. Like no one knows the map until they hash it. Every move is made in zero knowledge, so you have no idea what people are doing until you discover the location mathematically. Like all of this, like layers of blockchain complexity being added there that I think is worth exploring, but is also off-putting for 99.9% of players. Yeah, I know it's also early.
That's right. When you see also the people applying to Game Accelerator, do you see people coming from traditional gaming and interested in crypto, and it's kind of their first crypto project, or do you see people coming from the crypto, kind of like they've done something in either DeFi space or NFT space or DAO space, and now exploring gaming?
That's a great question. So I have one cohort. It's like a self-pilled doctor who just wanted to make a crypto game. Like he has no experience in games at all. I got somebody who is like brand new out of college, never done anything almost. I got a team that's like 50-50 casual game Solidity developers. I got a team that has like 10 years experience making games, regular games. I've got another one that's a mix, games and blockchain. So yeah, I think it's like pretty spread out. There's no obvious one. I've got a game that's strictly game industry, learning about crypto on the fly in my accelerator. Like is keen to learn, already getting mentored in crypto, but like just has barely scratched the surface. Um, my personal view is that it's a lot easier to learn how to make games than it is to learn why you should make crypto games. The philosophical barrier to Web3 is really high. Like, I'm making games because they're composable, meaning like other people can build on top of my games and there's no like walled garden. That's awesome and unlocks a shit ton of like value add that no one even can begin to scratch the surface of. Two, I'm building in Web3 in crypto because I want my players to play to own my game. I want to dilute myself to my players the way DeFi protocols do. And if I can get alignment with my players and alignment with the builders, I'm going to be able to build in a decentralized way that no one's ever seen before. Um, you know, 3, 4, 5, there are all these other reasons. And there are going to be ancillary reasons too. Like, we're going to solve credit with games, maybe. Like, one of the biggest problems on chain is knowing who's a human, right? Are you a human? Am I a human? How many of these accounts are mine? And how many of them are just individual people? And the Sybil resistance that we're looking for can happen with games because game players are basically just solving captchas all day long. Like, a game player is like just provably just becoming human with every step. And the more they play, the more human they are. And the harder it is to like have multiple accounts. You can't get like 1,000 Dota MMRs at 4,500. Like, that's too many lifetimes, right? And so what that means is we can have credit scores for players. We can have players do democratic voting that's like quadratic all of a sudden. And we have no idea, because it's all composable and on chain and public, the stuff we're going to build is just outside like the mental model of what people are thinking right now.
Mm-hmm. And also, when you think about the different layer one ecosystems so far, do you feel like they will see like interoperability starting to emerge soon, or do you feel like people will be kind of building their own ecosystems for like a couple years and interoperability will come later?
Everybody's building bridges in DeFi right now. It's like bridge season, weirdly. I think that interoperability will come. The backend will disappear eventually. Right now, people are building on Solana and Polygon and Arbitrum and BSC. Um, I think that, and XDAI, did I say that? Anyway, um, which is all for their own reasons. I I don't know what the future holds. My guess is that in the near future, that 99% of what happens in a game will happen off chain. It will resolve to on chain on a layer 2 that's either a ZK rollup or an optimistic rollup that's on like some kind of chain, side chain that's on Ethereum. Or so, that's my eventual guess, but I wouldn't like count the other layer ones out. It turns out that the ETH maxi approach isn't panning out as a philosophy right now, and there's enough security on the majority of non-Ethereum chains to support gaming anyway. You don't need like Fort Knox level cryptocurrency security.
And in terms of the use cases for games, when it comes to like traditional games, you can like really split it by now into like very kind of clear kind of verticals. Kind of, you can have your platformers, you can have your own like virtual worlds and like other types of like MMORPGs and things like that. How do you think about the emergence of the use cases in crypto? It's so early; it's probably like hard to like define those. But what do you see emerging?
Right. Well, we're going to have a lot of reproduction of the current genres, right? Like you said, platformers, roguelikes, whatever. They're going to mix. They've always been blurring, right? We have platformer roguelikes and we have 4X roguelikes and we've got platformer 4X eventually. Like, we'll just mix and match as we want. Um, the auto battler seems particularly well suited to crypto, right? Which is remarkable because the auto battler is kind of new as a concept, right? Like auto chess, it feels like that's like 4 years old. And it seems like the obvious match that we're going to see for a while anyway, because you don't need to do anything on chain and it's deterministic.
hmm Maybe for the audience, in case they don't know what auto battler is, maybe you can give a couple sentences on it.
Sure. So imagine your chess pieces moved on their own, and your job was only to set them up and decide which chess pieces you brought to the board. So you and your opponent do that with their chess pieces. Your setup is like an NFT almost, right? You don't change. You've changed it and it's done, and then you just say, okay, I want to battle this guy. And you do it, and then you find out who wins. That's a kind of simple approach that you can use, and because all the calculations don't happen to have on chain, because you can verify what they're going to be because they're deterministic, you only have very few registerable events that cost gas.
Last couple of questions I have. How do you stay up to date overall with both gaming and crypto? What are your favorites kind of day-to-day, week-to-week news sources?
I talk to people. I don't read any news sources at all. I just have like 20 hours of meetings a week with strangers. And I just ask them to leak alpha onto me as I leak it back onto them. And I play crypto games for 2 hours a week. And I try to do it publicly on a Let's Play.
That's cool. Do you have any parting words of advice for our audience?
If you want to break into crypto, the best place to start is with Andreas Antonopoulos' Mastering Bitcoin. And if you want to go a little bit further, I recommend cryptozombies.io. Two things I own no stake in, but I think are the best learning tools I've ever run into. If you're already in crypto and you want a job, hit me up. We have an enormous jobs board, and we're always looking to meet talent. And otherwise, I would say, oh boy, do your own research.
And if people want to find more information about your game accelerator, where should they go?
DeFiAlliance.co.
Well, thank you for having you today.
Have a great one.